In my house, loyalty matters. So I used my son's college fund on my stepdaughter. Now he won't speak to me. And before y'all start with all that reflect and accountability talk, just understand this. Folks love telling you what you should have done when they weren't the ones living in your house. Folks love acting like decisions get made in a vacuum, like people don't have patterns, attitudes, and ways about themselves that affect what you're willing to do for them. So, yeah, that's what I did. And I'm not about to sit here and pretend I did it for no reason. People keep saying I should have handled it differently, that I should apologize. But apologize for what exactly? For investing in the child who actually treated me like I mattered? For choosing peace in my own home? For rewarding loyalty? Let me back up. I got one son from my first marriage. That divorce wasn't smooth. It wasn't one of those we grew apart situations. It was bitter. It was paperwork and arguments and people picking sides. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't perfect in that marriage. I made mistakes. I can admit that. I'm not one of those men who acts like he never did nothing. But what I also know is this. I never put my hands on her or my child. Not once. Never. I wasn't out here doing what some guys do and then try to act holy later. I worked, I provided, I kept my responsibilities, but it was never enough for my ex. It was always something. Always another thing I wasn't doing right. And the thing about divorce is you don't just lose the marriage, you lose the story. Because once the relationship is over, whoever tells it first controls it. People keep acting like the divorce happened out of nowhere, like I just woke up one morning and decided to wreck my own house. Yeah, I cheated, but it wasn't some double life. It wasn't no secret apartment, no babies on the side, none of that. And it was a coworker. We got close. I was already sleeping on the couch half the week because me and my ex couldn't have a conversation without it turning into a courtroom. And before somebody says, you should have left first, okay? Maybe. But marriages don't end the day somebody cheats. They end long before that. They end when you stop being heard, when every conversation feels like a performance review, when you come home and feel like you're walking into a complaint box. She tells it like I destroyed our family. What nobody talks about is how that house felt before I ever stepped outside of it. I mean, we were already done. I just made the mistake that gave her a headline. And once that happened, that became the whole story. Not the years I worked overtime, showed up to games tired but still there, not the bills I paid without complaining, or the fact that I never put my hands on her, never scared my child, never left them without support. Just, he cheated. And when a kid hears that enough, especially from his mother, it becomes truth. It becomes the lens he sees you through. So yeah, my son started looking at me different. Like I wasn't just his father anymore. And I'm not saying I didn't hurt her. I did. I can own that. But what I won't accept is being reduced to that one mistake for the rest of my life. My son was old enough to understand some things, but still young enough to only see what his mama wanted him to see. So yeah, he took her side. Heavy. When we got shared custody, it wasn't like he acted happy to be with me. It wasn't like, hey, Dad. It was more like he was doing time, coming over with that look on his face like he was forced to be there, answering questions with one-word replies, rolling his eyes, acting irritated if I asked him about school, about his day, about anything. Now my wife, my current wife, she had a daughter from a previous relationship. Her daughter came into my life when she was 12. And that girl was a good kid. Not perfect, but good. Smart, polite, helpful without doing that fake, overly sweet thing. She didn't come in with an attitude. She didn't come in trying to test me. She didn't act like I was the enemy because I married her mama. She treated me like I was part of her life, like I counted. If she needed something, she asked. If I told her something, she listened. If I corrected her, she didn't turn it into a whole battle. She'd roll her eyes sometimes like any teenager, but she'd come back later and be normal. She'd apologize if she was wrong. She would say thank you. She would acknowledge effort. My son? My son would look at me like I was a stranger living in his mama's nightmare story. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, that's your child. Like I don't know that. I don't need a reminder. But here's what folks never want to talk about. How draining it is to keep reaching towards somebody who keeps pulling away. How heavy it is to keep trying to show love and being met with coldness. How tiring it is to be treated like a villain in your own child's life because your ex can't let the past go. So yes, over time I got closer to my stepdaughter, not because I was trying to replace my son or hurt him, but because in my own home I had one kid who moved like family and another kid who moved like I was a problem he had to tolerate. That does something to you. We had a college fund for my son. It wasn't a vague, we'll figure it out plan. It was money set aside. The plan was always to help him. My wife knew. The fund was discussed. Not every detail, not every dollar, but she knew there was money set aside for him. And for a while, everything stayed as planned. Then my stepdaughter got into college and she got into a good one. She worked for it too. Grades, programs, leadership stuff. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't coasting. She was moving like somebody who had a goal and a plan. And my wife, that was her baby. She was proud, you hear me? Like we were doing something right. My wife started talking numbers, tuition, housing, books, all that. And I'm not going to lie, I felt the weight of responsibility because I'm not the type of man who watches a kid struggle while I'm sitting on resources. And my son was still showing up every other week with that same distant energy, still treating me like I was in the way, still acting like my presence was optional. So yes, I made a decision. My wife and I talked about it practically. When I brought up the college fund, her eyes got so bright. She said something like, he's smart. He'll get scholarships. He'll get loans if he has to, but I think we'll have time to replace it. And I said, exactly. It'll be fine. And the truth is, I believe that. So we used the money. I told myself I'd rebuild it, catch up. Life didn't move the way I thought it would. Now my stepdaughter is already 2 years into college, and my son is getting ready to apply. He comes over one weekend, and he's actually talking more than usual. Still guarded, but he's talking. Mentioning schools, mentioning majors, mentioning things he wants to do. And I'm listening, because I'm his father. I want him to do well. So I tell him, we need to talk. We sit at the kitchen table, not dramatic, just regular. My wife is in the other room acting like she's busy, but I know she's listening because she knows what's coming. I tell him, calm, that college money, it's not there. He looks at me like he didn't hear me and he says, what you mean it's not there? I say, I used it. He blinks, slow, like he's trying to decide if he's about to get mad or if he's about to laugh. And he says, used it on what? And I say the truth because I'm not going to lie. I used it to pay for your stepsister's college. His face changes, but it's subtle. He doesn't blow up. He doesn't yell. He doesn't curse me out. He just looks at me and it's like something clicks behind his eyes. I keep talking because silence makes me uncomfortable in moments like that. I say, you're smart. You can get scholarships. You can take out loans. You can do what you need to do. You're going to be fine. He says nothing. I say, I had to make decisions for this household. She's been working hard. She's been consistent. She's been showing up. I can't just act like that doesn't matter. He looks at me and says, calm. So you thought using the money you and my mom set aside for me on her was the best decision for this household? The way he said you and my mom felt deliberate. I straighten up in my chair. I made the best decision for this household, period. I tell him, I run this house, I pay these bills, and I'm not about to let money sit somewhere when there's a need right in front of me. He nods slowly, not agreeing, just listening. So because I'm not smiling in your face every weekend, I don't deserve what was already set aside for me. That irritated me. It's not about smiling, I say. It's about how you move. It's about respect. It's about loyalty. You've made it clear how you feel about me for years. He leans back in the chair, studying me like he's seeing something new. And then he says it. I see you. Not loud, not angry, just clear. And he stands up. I say, what that mean? He pauses at the hallway and says, it means I see you. And that's it. No slammed doors, no yelling, just quiet. That night felt normal on the surface. He ate dinner, stayed in his room. My wife asked him if he needed anything, and he said he was good. Before bed, she asked me, "You think he understood?" I said, "He'll be fine. He's not a child," because that's what I believed. The next morning, I get up for work. His room is empty. Not messy empty, cleared out empty. I stand there for a minute because I know what that means. My wife comes behind me and says, "Where he at?" I say, "Probably at his mama's." She says, "You think he coming back?" I shrug. "He'll cool off." But 3 days go by. No call, no text. I send one. "You good?" Nothing. I call. Straight to voicemail. I wait another day. Then I call his mama. She answers, already defensive. "What?" I say, "Put him on the phone." She says, "He don't want to talk." So I drive over there. I knock. She opens the door halfway like I'm a salesman. "He doesn't want to see you." I say, "I'm his father." She says, "Then you should have acted like it," and tries to close the door. I push it just enough to see down the hallway. He's standing there, not hiding, just watching. I say, "We need to talk." He says, "You said everything already." I say, "You're not about to just disappear like this." And he says, calm as ever, "I didn't disappear, I left." And he walks back to his room. Door closes. And that's when I realize this isn't a tantrum. This is a decision. My son doesn't come back. His mama doesn't call to cuss me out, nothing. Then my stepdaughter comes home from college for the weekend. She walks in and looks at us and her face is tight. Not rude, just tight. She says, "Can I talk to y'all?" I'm thinking she's about to tell me about classes, about money, about some school issue. We sit down. She says, "Why didn't you tell me y'all used his money?" And my stomach drops because I was going to tell her. Eventually, I was going to find the right time. I was going to frame it properly. I was going to explain. But she's sitting there looking at me like she sees something she can't unsee. She says, "He didn't even tell me like he was trying to make you look bad. He just said it like it was a fact that he already accepted." And then she says the part that stung. She says, "I didn't ask you to do that." I say, "I did it because I wanted you to be good. I did it because you've been working hard. I did it because you've been respectful." She says, "That doesn't make it yours to give me." My wife is standing in the doorway now, quiet but listening. My stepdaughter says, "You punished him for not liking you." I say, "No, I made a decision based on what I saw. I'm not about to pour into somebody who treats me like I'm nothing." She says, "He treats you like that because of what happened with his mom." And right there, I felt that old irritation rise up because everybody keeps trying to drag me back to the divorce like it's the only thing that matters, like I'm not allowed to move forward. I say, "His mama has been in his ear." She says, "Or he has eyes and he knows what he saw and experienced." And she stands up and says, "I love you, but I can't sit here and act like this is okay." And she goes to her room. My wife comes over and sits next to me. "You heard what she said." I said, "So now everybody's turning on me?" She didn't jump back like she usually does when I get sharp. She stayed steady. "No," she said, "nobody's turning on you. They're just reacting to what we did." That word hit different. I said, "We made the best decision we could with what we had in front of us." She nodded. "At the time, yes." I didn't like that at the time. I said, "Don't start acting like I forced you into anything. You were right there." She said, "I was, and I justified it. I told myself he'd be fine. I told myself he's smart. I told myself we make it up later." She paused. "But that doesn't change what it was." Now that felt like a shift. A regret, and I didn't like that either. Because regret sounds like mistake, and I don't believe it was a mistake. I said, "So what you saying?" She looked at me and said, "I'm saying we made a decision based on how it felt, not how it would land on everyone involved." And for the first time, I didn't have a clean response. So after that weekend, my stepdaughter went back to school and the energy changed. She still spoke, still hugged her mama, although not as tight. But with me, it was different. Short answers. quiet distance, like she was protecting herself from being part of something unfair. And my son, still nothing. I hear about things through other people. He got accepted. He picked a school. He got scholarships, loans too. He made it work like I said he would. And I'm sitting here thinking, see, he was fine. But at the same time, the silence in my house got louder. My wife and I started arguing more. Not shouting, but that steady, cold tension that makes you tired. She'd say things like, you don't get to be shocked that he left. And I'd say, he could have talked to me. She'd say, he did. He said, I see you. You just didn't like what it meant. Then one night I tried to call my stepdaughter straight to voicemail. I text her, call me when you can. Nothing. I text again a week later. You good? Nothing. And I'm not going to lie, that part bothered me more than my son because she had been the one who made me feel like I wasn't fighting for a relationship all the time. It's a strange thing when you realize the people you felt the most loyal to have decided they don't want to deal with you. About 2 weeks later, I got an email, not from my ex, from her lawyer. Subject line, notice of misappropriation of custodial funds. I read it twice before it registered. What the fuck? Turns out the college fund wasn't just some savings account. It was structured, custodial, set up during the marriage. Both our names attached, which means it wasn't technically mine to move unilaterally. I told myself that didn't matter. I was contributing to that account too. But legally, that wasn't the whole truth. The email said I had 30 days to either replace the funds or prepare for civil action. I called my ex and she said calm as ever, you thought I wasn't going to do anything to protect him. I said it was my money too. She said it was his. That irritated me. I said he's fine, he's already getting loans. She said that wasn't the agreement. And that's when I realized this wasn't about feelings. This was paperwork. And paperwork doesn't care about pride. My wife saw the email that night. She sat down slower than usual and she said, we didn't think this all the way through. I said, we can replace it. She said, with what? And that was the first time the weight of it felt real. Because now it wasn't just silence. It was court. And I'll be honest, that's when people started calling me the problem to my face. People rarely say it to your face. Apparently it had been going on behind my back for a while now. Now, though, folks stopped checking in and inviting us places. The little jokes got louder. The energy shifted. I heard somebody say he always got a reason. And that irritated me because, yes, I do have a reason. People act like reasons don't matter. But I'll sit with this part, too. I didn't think my son would disappear overnight without a conversation. I didn't think my stepdaughter would look at me like I was something she needed to step away from. I didn't think my wife would stop standing next to me. I damn sure didn't think I'd be dealing with the legal system. And maybe some will say, well, that should tell you something. Maybe they say that's the mirror. Maybe that's the moment I'm supposed to fold and apologize and admit I was wrong. But I can't do that. Because in my mind, I made a decision based on what was in front of me at the time. I made a decision based on who was showing up and who wasn't. I made a decision based on what kind of energy I wanted in my home. A few days after the email, I sat in a small office across from my lawyer. Not some big downtown firm. Just a steady, older black man with glasses low on his nose and a way of looking at paperwork like it personally offended him. And he'd already spoken to her attorney and was flipping through the documents now. This doesn't look good, he said finally. I leaned back. It was my money too. He didn't look up. It was a custodial account, jointly established during the marriage, designated for your son. You didn't have unilateral authority to redirect it. I contributed to it, I said. He nodded. And you were obligated to it. That irritated me. So what are my options? He sighed and slid the papers together. You try to settle. How? You replace the funds in full, likely with interest. And he hesitated. And what? They're asking for a written acknowledgement, an apology letter outlining the misuse. I laughed a little. An apology? He shrugged. It would keep it out of court. My wife was sitting next to me, quiet the whole time. She touched my arm and said softly, just write it. I looked at her. Write what? That I stole from my own child? She didn't argue. She just said, write that you made a mistake. The lawyer leaned back and said, calm. If this goes to court, you will likely lose, and it will be public record. I said, I'm not admitting to something I don't believe. The lawyer held my gaze. It's not about belief, it's about liability. But at that point, I'd already dug my heels in, because writing that letter would mean saying I was wrong. And I don't believe I was. And so we went to court. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no gavel pounding like in movies, just paperwork, statements, dates. The judge didn't care about loyalty, didn't care about disrespect, didn't care about how my house felt. The judge cared about the account, and I lost. Full repayment ordered, interest, fees. And because it went to court instead of mediation, it wasn't quiet anymore. People found out. And now it wasn't just he hurt his son. It was he took his son's college money. That stain sits different. When we walked out of the courthouse, my wife didn't yell. She just said, I cannot believe you couldn't even write the letter. And that was the first time I saw something in her face that wasn't frustration. It was distance, like she was looking at me and realizing she didn't fully know me. That bothered me more than the ruling. A few weeks later, she told me she was leaving. She said, I could live with the decision. I couldn't live with you refusing to see what you did. I told her she was overreacting. She said, no, I'm reacting. And she left. After the court ruling, I tried one more time, and not to beg, just to explain. I texted him, can we talk? Man to man? No response. I called, voicemail. So I left a message. I'm not calling to argue, I just want you to understand my perspective. I paused, because even saying that felt like I was defending myself in a room he'd already walked out of. I did what I thought was right at the time. I didn't do it to hurt you. I almost said more. Almost said I was sorry, but I didn't, because sorry implies regret for the act. And I don't regret the act. I regret how it ended. I regret the silence. I regret the way people look at me now. But I don't regret making a decision in my own house based on what I believed mattered. But here's the truth. I never thought it would cost me this much. I never thought standing on principle would leave me standing alone. But if I had to go back to that moment at the table, knowing what I knew then, I still would have chosen loyalty. Maybe I didn't think through how deep that money was tied to his trust in me. Maybe I underestimated what it would mean to him. Maybe I thought he would fight or argue. He didn't. He left. He never called back. And maybe that's the part people want me to sit with.